One thing that was sold a lot of, I mentioned the grinder mixers. Every little farm had hogs in those days. And so they not only needed a grinder mixer, they needed a heater to keep them baby pigs warm. So these NIPCO heaters were very popular as a portable heater to keep baby pigs alive. And some cow barns and chicken barns too, but mostly it was for the pig raisers. And this is a picture of a guy who got a key in the mail, and everybody did. They got a key in the mail. And if your key opened that heater lock, you got the heater. So this isn't the one that won that heater, but this is one of those keys. So Dad got real busy fixing and selling NIPCO heaters. He'd get 6 at a time and set them up, and sometimes a month later he'd get 6 more. And he was the guy that did that. He did parts and some bookkeeping with my mom helping, plus he did the NIPCO heater business. Now in the background here, if you look close, you can see farm management games and a little bit of that IH circular display. And of course, there's a sale bill and a dance bill for the Saturday night dance. So that's the way things were back in those days. And then pretty soon the town of Dodge was celebrating their Jubilee. Oh yeah, Scouts, this is again out of the Dodge paper. Even though there was an ad for Scouts, I don't know that a Scout was ever sold there. We sold a lot of pickups, or they did, Les and Dad, because that's what farmers needed for hauling them pigs and cattle around was a slide-in stock rack inside of a good heavy-duty pickup. So that's what the common thing was. And again, the grinder mixers. One year, Les got a award as selling the most grinder mixers in the Midwest region. I don't know what year that was, probably 62 or 3. I do have some plaques here that you can come look at later for some sales awards and service awards, and that 1981 award that every dealer that was still in business at that time got. There was a time, too, when this rotavating came on, and this Howard Rotavator Company convinced Dad and Les to try the rotavator business, and so they did this and had a movie and all that, and it never really took off. Not like the NIPCO heaters did. Then, back up. So for that Jubilee, one guy went around town to every business and said, "Oh, you guys get ready, I'm coming to take your picture, dress up." So they knew this was happening. This was sometime probably in the winter of 62 or 3. And then M&W Dual poster. This is the parts counter. Dad, that's Les, Dad, Roland Eichmeyer, Dennis Steeren, Vic Durneman, and my grandpa John. All these guys kind of came with the business, these 3. Plus one more guy in the shop. He was kind of actually helped us kids a lot, setting stuff up and cleaning things and washing tractors. Tony Tackner was his name. He had one leg, and he hopped around on crutches. He had a little bit of a stump on one side. But Robert told me recently that Tony saved him one day. Robert was steam cleaning a tractor, and he got done and went to shut it off, and he's all wet, and he grabs the cord, and he was frozen. He couldn't pull the plug, and he couldn't move. He was slowly going down. And Tony saw that, came over with his crutch and knocked the power out of his hand, and Robert's alive and well today. May not have turned out that way if it wouldn't have been for Tony and his crutch. So anyway, in 63 was a big Jubilee celebration. Here was probably a booster trip. Yeah, it is. A booster trip that was leaving at Dodge, and there's the store building again. There was a Cub Cadet sitting out front. Started real early selling those Cub Cadets. 61 or 2, I think, they sold Cub Cadets, and a lot of them. But when the red ones came out in 80, no more Cub Cadets, then we went with Aaron's. The Cub Cadets got a little bit high priced, and the local distributor from York that sold Aaron's and Poland chainsaws convinced us to not only sell the chainsaws, which we'd been doing, but sell the Aaron's line of equipment. But anyway, a lot of Cub Cadets around Dodge, including the push mowers. And I didn't do this much, but my other younger brothers talk about mowing lawns for old ladies with those 2-cycle lawn boy push mowers. Next one. Again, another picture of the parade in June of 63. That's me driving the tractor with a printing press on there for the local newspaper. And a classmate of mine, Dick, was on there, and it was the son of the people running the paper. Let's see, what's next? Okay, yeah, again, back to the parade. This is my cousin Paul and his sister, my cousin Caroline, when they were in the parade when he was 5 and 4 years old. And I got that out of the paper a couple weeks ago. Yeah. Okay, so again, back around that area, 63, I kind of took a stab at this. I think this was 4th of July, 63. I know it was the 4th of July, but I think it was 63. And the 303s were out, and we had a family reunion picnic at the Dodge Park. And Dad and Les were talking about some wheat being ready north of town at Benny Wisniewski's. So we went north to Dodge, and we get out there, and Dad said I should come along. And I was the only kid out there. Everybody else was adults. And I think Dad made a round, and he said, get up there, Glenn, and see if you can do it. So that was my first driving of a 303. And just my first, because I did a few more of that. We actually put that same head-on combine Milo in the fall, and then we put a corn head on, and they combine corn, and kind of did that to introduce people to the combines. You know, there was a lot of picker shellers and pickers and pull-type combines, but not so many self-propelled. And Dad and Les saw that this was the future, and so they made sure that farmers got the opportunity to drive a self-propelled combine and use it, or have the custom work done. And Dad and Les did custom work. Robert riding that combine, I did, and Brother Tom did. 303s and 403s. Oh yeah, anywhere along the way, if you got a question, go ahead, but I'd rather wait till the end. But okay, I don't remember what's next, Brian. Okay, again, in that summer of 63, in August, we think it was, because we went out west to my dad's cousin, Roland Musil at Potter, and he was a big wheat farmer, and he was done with wheat harvest, and he gave us a grand tour around the Potter area. And so this camper up there, Dad made that during the winter of 62 and 3. Besides that centennial coming on, or that 75 anniversary, he made that camper, and I had some hand in it, hand me this and hand me that type of thing. But the best part of the pickup is this headlight right here and the hubcap. Now, after that trip, the camper came off, and I drove that pickup a few times, but I didn't get to ever drive it with that camper on. In fact, there were so many of us on that trip. Mom, take the picture, I guess, of course. But one of us kids, not me, slept on the seat of the pickup at night. We camped along the way, and there and back. So my first trip out of Nebraska, or Iowa, and that was pretty memorable. And as a family, it would be long, and my sister would be gone, and me, so that's the last time we went as that kind of group, too. And what's next? Oh, yeah. The local feed salesman drove a 57 International Gold pickup, and I saw that often. And George was a friendly guy. He always waved at everybody. Of course, he was a feed salesman. I think they were taught to do that. But one day he got T-boned at an intersection, and that 57 IH pickup is grand totaled. So no chance of that one surviving. What's the next one? Oh, yeah. Spring of 64, February. It was time for pancake days. So on Saturday and Sunday before this event, we were down there cleaning up, scrubbing the floors and covering windows. And I still remember everybody, there was a stack of these, and everybody that wanted one could have it, and there were a few left over at the end. But this was the only one and only time they did it. They didn't do it again in 65 or 6 because it was a big production. And, of course, Harvester people were there with their new product films and so on. But the main thing that us kids were worried about or concerned about was the Laurel and Hardy films that they showed, too. So we saw plenty of those. And yeah, it was a Monday in February, but there was no school for the Mlnarik kids that day. Yeah. So just the next week, of course, the paper came by and took a little coverage of the event. There's my mom to the left, and then my Aunt Rosemary Less's wife. And the story says they flipped 800 pancakes and 1,080 sausages. And those sausages were locally prepared at the Wimmers plant. Anybody heard of Wimmers Meat Products? They got their start in Dodge, Nebraska. Dodge and Snyder, actually, and then they moved to West Point and maintained that Dodge plant for quite a while. I don't remember what's next. Okay, yeah, this one. Now, out of the clear blue in '64, Dad asked me one weekend if I would run a ride along to get some trucks from the IH plant in Dayton, Ohio. I said, well, yeah. So he said, well, Les was going to go to a product introduction meeting in Chicago, and from there, he was going to take a bus or train to Dayton, I forget which, and he just wanted some company to come back. Well, my cousin Robert, his son was 11 or 12, and here I was 14. So then in future builds of fire trucks, but he sold that to the local Snyder Rural Fire District, and it stayed right around there. And I'm sure it got shown many times to prospective customers in the few later years. This is kind of what we do, folks, and I can build a fire truck for you. Well, I don't know if they sold any more red 1700s or not, because by '66 I was off in the Navy. But anyway, there's a little history behind this 1700, because I'd forgot where it went and thought, for all I knew, it got delivered to a fire department in Sioux Falls or Oklahoma City. I didn't know. I didn't think there's any way to find out. So I just didn't even go after that. Next one. But when I see it parked along the road in Snyder in 2021, I said, that's that 1700 that I rode in. You can ask my wife. We did a U-turn and went back, and I got my phone out of my pocket, and I took some pictures that day. So it didn't take long, and I went through Snyder on a business day, and I went inside, and I said, there was a guy in there I knew, Gerald Kazmaier, and I said, Gerald, let's talk about that 1700 fire truck out front. And he said, okay. He had some knowledge of it. He was one of the longtime employees. And I said, what's the story? Why is it sitting outside? And he said, well, there's a little, it was been in the firefighter museum in Kearney. There's a little bit of a dispute between the family. Some of the Smeal family had passed away, and I don't know exactly the details, but anyway, they didn't want that fire truck there and the hassle, so they kicked it out, and it came back to Snyder, and it sat alongside the road for quite a while. And I asked Gerald, is there any chance then of that truck, changing ownership or anything? Oh, no, the family's going to figure it out. They'll get it figured out. Well, still, in the spring of '23, it's out there. And I went back in and I said, we're having a great big Red Power Roundup in Grand Island in June. Any chance we can get that truck out there? And now I'm dealing with grandsons and grandnephews, and no way. They didn't even care to hear my story about it. So, couldn't get it. I said, we'll haul it. We won't even drive it. We'll haul it. And then if it goes back to that museum, we'll haul it to the museum. And I was just making this up. I didn't have any hauling lined up, but no, they were not. They were not ready for that. So pretty soon it disappeared, and I called again to this Gerald Kazmaier, and I said, where's that? And he said, it's back in the museum. Okay, so fast forward to about a month ago. I know it's in the museum in Kearney, and I called a recent good friend of mine now, Steve Fisher, who's the vice president of our Nebraska club. And I said, he lives out in Farnham, about 50 miles away. I said, you want to take a ride on your bike some weekend and go over that firefighter museum? And he did. He worked it in. And it's actually in the service bay. I don't know what they're doing to it, but it's not out in the display area yet. But if you ever get to the firefighter museum in Kearney, Nebraska, it'll be there. And there'll be a placard pretty much about how Don Smeal built it. It won't have any of my story on it, but it's there. So the right side of that seat was sit on by me more than anybody else, I'm sure. And there's a couple more, I think. Yeah. So that's kind of the big happenings of my years in the 60s that I have photographic evidence of. Hold it now. I went on to graduate in spring of '65. And in the fall of '64, I, along with a couple buddies, had joined the Navy Reserve. kind of to be sure we didn't get drafted by the Army. So we do our Navy meetings. My two buddies went on their active duty, 2-year commitment in late 65, early 66. By March 66, I had to go. So I did that and did my 2 years basically on an East Coast ship. Got back, went to college for a little while. Had been dating my current wife, Joan, for a while, and we got married in 69. Just celebrated our 55th wedding anniversary. So anyway, I spent the next few years, back a little bit, I guess, I forgot. But the pickups, back to those pickups, there was very few four-wheel drives sold. They were two-wheel drivers. And the town of Dodge had a four-wheel drive. There's somebody else here from Dodge. Do you remember any four-wheel drive international pickups around? No. No, I don't either. Or Scouts, for that matter, or Travelalls. When the Travelall was in town, that meant the IH Block Band was there. Or the Scout. They sometimes drove that. Oh, I will back up a little bit. Before I went in the Navy, then, as I graduated high school, I worked at the store from May till the following March. I got to do a little better jobs than burning paper and filling coal buckets. But still, I was, after school, if we went out of part, the emergency parts source was either Scribner Implement or West Point Implement or Spanicki's and Lee or some other dealer. And I would customarily, by 5 o'clock during the week, maybe once or twice, go to a nearby dealer. And sometimes they had a part they wanted from us, and we needed a part from them. So I drove a lot of fairly new international pickups to other dealerships in those days. And so did my cousin and brother. And I don't ever remember driving a four-wheel drive. In fact, the nice one I remember was a 900 with that little 266 V8 in it, short box. But anyway, that's kind of the way the 60s wrapped up for me. Like I said, I got my 2-year commitment completed, got out, came back to the area, and before long, found out I could go back on active duty and be stationed in Omaha at the Navy headquarters there, the Navy Reserve headquarters. So I took a 4-year assignment there, and no pictures of that. But by the spring of 73, it was a do or die time, either get out again, and I talked to Dad a little bit about what was available for me in the business. No, all the mechanics were fully trained, and he didn't need another parts man. And so I stayed in the Navy, went back to sea. This is the USS Waddell. I served on that for 3 years, from April 73 to April 76. I picked it up on a Westpac deployment in April, and by July then it was done. We came back. We were in the South China Sea and the Gulf of Tonkin. And wrapping up, the Vietnam War was wrapping up. So we actually didn't shoot any guns. They just ceased firing guns in March, and I got on in April. So we did a lot of gun shoots, but just target practice and refresher type training, but no actual lobbing targets into North Vietnam. So one of the other things being on ships, you refuel underway. And I'll speak about this just for a moment, that this is the USS Ranger, an aircraft carrier. They have a lot of fuel, and so there was a time or two when we needed strictly fuel. We'd pull alongside, and that's an underway replenishment. Probably at about 12 knots on an exact course and speed, because you can't run into each other. Everybody gets relieved of command if that happens. So we did some of that, and we provided flight support for the carriers when they launched aircraft. And this was a picture. Again, I didn't have an assignment during these refueling details, so I was able to sneak up to the signal deck and take some pictures. That's the USS Wabash in the middle. And on the other side, I'm pretty sure that's the Cleveland, an ammunition ship. And we were both getting fuel at the same time. And so when you break away, it's a matter of get away from here quickly. And the breakaway speed was 25 knots, both at the same time. Those people on those oilers were just masters at their game for sending the fuel flawlessly and not breaking cables or breaking hoses. Once in a great while, we had an emergency breakaway, and the fuel was still flowing, and we had to pull away. That wasn't nice, but and nowadays I imagine they have to report that to the EPA or wherever, because there's going to be a little bit of an oil slick out there. Not to mention the oil on the deck. But anyway, so I did that till 76, and then I had a commitment yet till 79 to be in the Navy. So I went from my ship duty to recruiting duty in Phoenix, and I was living in Tempe. And go back a little bit. This was a home on leave, and actually getting ready to move to San Diego. I stopped back often when I was on leave to stop and talk to Dad and the guys and just see how things were going. And back to early 73, 74 era, then Dad told me one time that they're now putting German engines in the 756 tractors, and he said that they're really good and really sturdy, and he just can't seem to get them quick enough. There was kind of a shortage of 56 series tractors. Then I don't have much of a photo support for this, but in 79, when I was still in Phoenix, my expiration of enlistment was August, and I talked with my Navy recruiters and Navy detail or assignment people, and they told me that my next job would probably be either in the Pentagon or some overseas assignment in Japan, Korea, or Germany, by myself, no family. And we talked about that, and I said, I don't think I'm ready for that. I think my 12 years are going to be done. I did 12 years of active duty already, so I wasn't going to throw that away. I thought I'll stay in the reserves and get some retirement value out of it. But I just didn't see moving my family around 2 or 3 more times, and I valued the upbringing I had so much and the stability of it that I was ready to move my family back to Nebraska. So when Dad said that they're coming out to see this new tractor introduction in February of 79, they stayed with us for a couple days. So we got to talk a little, and I not only asked him if there was room for me now at the business as a parts man, but he in turn said, well, you interested in watching this new tractor introduction? I can probably get you in. So I said, yeah. I just called my boss and I said, I got to have another day leave. I got something I got to do. So I got another day of leave. And I'm pretty sure this was the badge that they used to get in those 2+2 introductions. Again, I don't know why I didn't have a camera along, but I basically got in with, I was Glen Mlnarik there. But okay, all that aside, that production or introduction of the 2+2 was really something. Was anybody else ever there or heard about it? Okay, Ron. Do you remember what class you went through or what week?
It was in February. Mm-hmm. In the morning we left, it was 20 below here in Lincoln.
Did it rain when you were there and the buses get stuck?
It rained that day.
It might have been the same week.
Getting a test drive.
I never got a test drive or went out to that track. Paul was there, my nephew, my cousin Paul, and Les and Dad. And Dad said, you know, Paul's here, you might as well come out. So, I mean, I wasn't connected to the dealership at all at that point. I'd been in the Navy the last 8 years. So, but anyway, I knew where this grounds was. I flew over it before in the Navy plane that the guys that worked for the pilots. You know, once in a while they got on a trainer plane and we flew over that proving ground on the way to Flagstaff. And that production of introducing that tractor, I mean, we sat out in this audience, and there was a raised stage and some music going, and then pretty soon the lights dimmed, and you could hear the tractor starting up. And then I forget the background music for this point, but they drove the nose of the front grill out through the curtains. And then it sat there a while, and they danced a little more and sang a little more. Oh, that was the age of Aquarius.
But they changed the word Aquarius to
Aquarius. And then when they finally got it out there and talked about all it can do, it was "You Took a Fine Time to Leave Me, Lucille" by Kenny Rogers. That's what I remember. And they changed the words to that, and it was a fine time to get stuck in the field. You heal. So Yeah, and on the stage then after they had it all opened up and the 2+2 is in full view and they're revving it up and there's male and female dancers up there dressed like you'd expect for that age, you know, kind of like the Green Acres, and they're dancing around and different music going on. And anyway, again, not having been in the IH business, I just kind of sat back and watched. I didn't. Dad even told me, if anything, you know, I'll introduce you to a few other dealers, but he said, you better stay away from the corporate guys. So, so I did. But anyway, later on that evening, they had the big banquet, the steak feed, and of course, a couple kegs of beer, and instead of chips and dip on the table, there was ribs, baskets of ribs on the tables, and you milled around talking to people, waiting for your steak to get done, and trying not to fill up on ribs. Then, one last thing that I remember, I think it was the next day, then Dad stayed with me and talked to Les and all this, and in fact, I asked him if there was room, so him and Les talked about that. He said that, you know, all that rain, that caused so much mud, the buses got stuck. It had only rained about an inch or less, but, you know, wet sand will get you stuck in a bus, so they had them 2+2s out there pulling out those buses, and they just walked them right out. And was kind of a selling point. Yeah.
Probably did more to sell the 2+2 concepts to dealers than anything.
That exactly. So I'm getting to. It was an act of God that the rain that came at that time, and those 2+2s. You know, where do I sign? I need one of them. But anyway, Les did book a couple of them, and in short order he got a couple more. I think that first year they sold either 4 or 5 of them. And some of them went to green guys. And a couple of them, the Prosts still have them. North of Dodge. And one Prost has 3 of them. And they're all pretty tough shape, but they got them and they like them. Well, anyway, and anything else you'd like to say, Ron, about that? Okay. Any other particular? Okay. Again, I was an uninvited guest, you might say, but I was there. So in 81, I'm not sure if that's 81 or 2, but the paper did this who's who around town, and so they go through the whole thing about when the business started in 59, and then of all things, that's a 284 and a 786. And then Paul is right there. You can see he's on a crutch. His daughter Jessica, and that's me, and that's Dad. That 786 had a couple birthdays around the store. It just sat there. But I think the 284 went quicker than the 786.
The 786s, we could sell those in Nebraska. They didn't ever test them.
Maybe that's why. I don't know. I didn't get behind that. I just know I moved it a few times to Moe, where it was parked on the lot.
886, they took the cab off.
Yeah.
Somehow
Les is the one that booked tractors, and he got that on him, and then it sat there a couple of years. But I know one.
Through the test track to get it certified, so they couldn't sell it in Nebraska.
Oh, could be. One guy I remember was on the verge of buying it, but he didn't like that he didn't have a cab, and so he didn't buy it. So it sat there a little longer. Well, let's see. After this, there were, back to Paul's crutch. In June of that year, him and his wife were off their motorcycle standing by it, and a driver veered off the road and killed his wife and hurt him pretty badly. So that's why he's on crutches. But complete story on him is about 15 years later, he got killed in a motorcycle accident too on his way to Sturgis. So unfortunately, he's not around anymore. His older brother, Robert, is, and in fact, I got some of the plaques from the business. And just recently, I asked Robert if I could at least use them for this, and he said yes. So here's the service plaque from 77, 78, 9, 80, 81, 82, 83. And yes, we had a small building in a downtown, and they were constantly getting pressured from Harvester to build out on the highway somewhere. And they had the highway in mind about 9 miles away, and Dad and Les sure didn't like that. That wasn't going to have a Dodge address anymore, and they remotely considered out on Highway 91, but never really seriously. They kind of knew how to play that game with the harvester reps, like, well, we'll try and buy some ground. You check back with us. And Dad told me that, yeah, they'd check back and say, what kind of progress are you making? No, we just can't seem to buy that ground. They won't split off 10 acres or whatever. And pretty soon they wanted to know names of the people and the ground they owned and how hard you were trying to buy it. So they were getting pretty hard about it. But then all of a sudden, the guys came around from Harvester and introduced themselves, brand new guys. So all of that history of pressuring to buy this ground and build a building, that went away because now there was new guys in charge. So, and when Case came in, the same sort of thing happened. The guys were Case guys; they weren't Harvester guys, and so kind of bought a couple more years of time, stalling to not build and get in debt to build up a new building. We did, or Dad and Les did, buy the old railroad depot property in '67 when I was gone, and they tore the building down and put up a pretty decent-sized shop. There's a little better picture of it a little later, which is still in use today by a local guy fixing cars there. I think the next thing, well, yeah, there's some, we did oil booking days and had lunches and save on your oil purchases. But I just about forgot this again. In 1980, well, actually, the fall of '79, Dad says, we've been in business 20 years. Can you believe that? And I was pretty new there. I just started in August of '79, or restarted. But he says, I just think we should have a party. I'm just so happy we did this. Well, there's a Dodge Auditorium, and he couldn't seem to get it lined up until about April. And I really think the problem was Les didn't really want to do it. and Dad finally said, we're doing it, So sent cards out to every customer. If you want to go, let us know. There's a meal for you. And there was not a big presentation about, here's oil specials. That was minor. It was just a meal. Thank you for your business. Thank you for being our customer. So at every plate, Dad had ordered these cups. And every plate had one, and you were welcome to take your cup along. And then my Uncle Les was left-handed, so he made them both ways. You see very few coffee cups with logos on both sides, and Dad did that on purpose. Oh, I will back up a little bit. Again, way back to '67, and I know that because it's in the front page here. Dad went to the Tipton, Georgia training farm. And I think Les went too, but I don't know much about that. Dad talked about this later on, because again, I was not around in '67. It was a dry county, and of all things, this is what he remembers about it, kind of like I have my memories of getting into the 2+2 introduction. His assigned roommate, needed his beer every night. And so he went to the neighboring county and bought a case of beer or whatever he had to buy, came back and pretty well got hammered, and the next day he was shot. So Dad remembers that. But he did talk about having the chance to drive green tractors and Oliver, John Deere, everything, Fords, blue ones, and compare them to at the time they were comparing to 656s and 504s and that sort of thing. So that's part of my Dodge implement collection here. Oh, and back to that. Dad gave out a lot of things for Christmas: ashtrays, hot pads, rulers, rain gauges, ice scrapers. And there's a few things that I find over the years, and it even has the old former owner's name on it, Joe Kilderer. So that's prior to 1959. And you're welcome to come and look at all this later if you want to. But by the, 84, when Case came in, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, the ag. Oh, that's right, the Red Power Showdown. Yes, sorry. Was it 82? I think so, 82. Yeah. in the summer of '82, Dodge, Implement, West Point, Colfax County, and Victor's in Fremont got together. And again, I had no part in selecting the place. Les and Dad did that. And they selected a farm, actually farmed by a guy that farmed with green stuff, between Snyder and North Bend on Highway 79. And set up the tent and all that, and had their own little parade of power. I remember an F-12, and I think then was an M or Super M, 560, an 806, and then and a 2+2. And of course we had lunch there and all that, and hauled a lot of stuff from Dodge down there to set up, and my wife and mom were involved in that. Did you come down to that, Brian? Yeah, after school or something? Yeah. Did you ever do anything like that? A Progress Days or Red Power Showdown? No. Yeah. Well, I think Harvester pressured all of these dealers, and they said, how about if we do one together? And they said, find some commonly. And that was kind of a hassle getting 4 dealerships to agree on a place. You know, Fremont wanted it a little closer to them, and West Point wanted it closer to them. And of those 4 dealerships, Dodge Implement was the smallest one. West Point's still in business, and so is Victor's. Colfax County's out of business. Of course, so is Dodge Implement. And the next week's paper had some coverage in it, even though it was not in the Dodge area. There was a picture of the 5488 with a 30-foot disc maybe. And again, that was available for use by any farmer if you wanted to use that 54. I don't know, did you ever use it? Because I remember a lot of guys came in and said, can I use that tractor and disc? And yes, for one day you can use it. Yep. Well, anyway, then by again, we did the annual parts savings, open houses, and oil bookings and that sort of thing. I think this was from late '83. But by early '85, when Case came in and said, you need to update this, you need to update that, you need to put in a computer system, because we didn't have one. Dad and Les said, that's it, we're done. And Case told them, you can't give or sell your rights to be a dealer to anybody, like me or any family, or sell it for $1 to your best friend. There's no grandfather rights. It's when you're done, there's no dealership here. So we had a soft closing in June. The door was unlocked. People could come in, and they did, but we tried to be closed so we could get stuff ready. We did a parts return, and of course cleaning up stuff, doctoring it the way it needed to be to get it accepted. And thanks to the Nebraska legislature and the law of the state, the major company that you were a dealer of had to take those parts back as long as they were saleable in new condition and still in the price book. And so we followed that old price book paper stuff, no computer list. But anyway, we made our list out of all the parts we wanted to return, and they sent us back these little IBM cards. And then, of course, we come up with some more, did another return. But it all got combined together and had a semi-load and more of a return. But I still remember combine guards that we hadn't sold for years. In fact, they probably got took off of 715s and 815s, and then they put on a floating cutter bar, so those guards came off. We'd buff up the bolt marks and spray them so they looked like new. You couldn't see any markings on them. And at 5 o'clock or so every afternoon, we'd line up the stuff in the shop, and 8 o'clock in the morning, we'd take it all down and tag them and put them in a box, and they got returned. And there's codes on those return cards of stuff that Case is going to put back in the system, or they're going to scrap it. A lot of that stuff we sent back, and they paid Dad and Les for it, went right to scrap. And if we'd have sent it, very small pallet, bottom part of a pallet back of rejections. It was minimal. So, again, we got coached real well on that, and that's kind of what made the end a little bit better for Dad and Les. They finally got paid for all their inventory. But one final thing about that. Keep going, Brian. Oh, yeah, here's a good question. Day of the sale, from the top of the roof, my sister Shirley's taking pictures. All of a sudden, I got pictures again. That's me. Anybody know who that is? He's alive and well today. Tall guy. He's not standing on a block. No guesses? No. He started a magazine. Daryl Miller. Daryl Miller, that's him. He had actually come around the store when he knew it was closing, and he and Dad dealt on some posters and different things and literature, and Daryl bought some things before the sale. And in fact, Daryl told me later, he says, that was a tough deal, that deal, because the dealership in St. Paul was having sale the same day. St. Paul's about another 90 miles away, and I think Daryl was there in the morning and he was in St. Paul in the afternoon. So, next. Again, just a couple of views from the top of the building, the parts books and parts, and then a lot of this is truck, and then those short lines like Lindsay and Gale and Kiwani, all of that. A lot of barrels making temporary tables. I talked earlier about burning papers down at the store after school. There was a wire ring on this corner. That's where I took it all to burn it. And in the next picture, you'll see the parts shelves. We actually took the parts bins out of the store. And I wasn't in favor of this. I said, why don't we just sell them in place? Why go all through this work? Yeah, there. And Dad said, oh, they'll sell so much better if they're clean. So we carted them out the back door, and guess who washed them? Yeah. I came home every night just filthy and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm washing parts shelves, and I don't like it, but that's my job. So. Anyway, Dad was right. They brought good money the day of the sale. And the old pickup back there, that's Curly's pickup, one of the mechanics, and it died about 15 years ago, and it's no longer around. Here we got Dad, and I'm not sure who else. Well, the auctioneers, but yeah, a couple more relatives in there. So day of sale, this is that depot building, we called it, the depot where they worked on combines, and there's another big overhead door here. And the IH was okay with that, to a point, but they still thought you can't have buildings that are block and a half apart, and we were, block and a half apart. So anyway, there's a 52 or 488, I think it was a 52, 10, and then maybe a 10 or 1466, and an 8, and 560s and all that, and then an F12 and a 1020 up there. They didn't sell very well that day, so they didn't go. And Dad told me later, well, we didn't do so good down on the heavy equipment. It just wasn't bringing good money, so they kept it. But then Irv at West Point Implement hired Les to be salesman for a couple years, and Les said, I'll be your salesman, but I want to be able to sell my tractors too. So that was the deal. Les sold a lot of equipment for West Point and developed customer base for him from the Dodge, Snyder, northern part of the territory area, and Les got to sell his tractors, and within a year they were all sold. That's about the end, except I'll tell you one more thing about that final parts return. Everything's done. It's probably February, March of '86. Dad called me one morning. He said, can you stop over? I got to talk to you about something. Okay, well, this was unusual. Dad didn't usually call me and say he had, just next time you're there, we talked about stuff. But this one, he wanted me to come next day. So I did. And he showed me this letter he got from Case Company. And it said, thank you very much for your business and your parts return. Enclosed is your letter of credit for a pretty good six-figure number. And Dad said, what? And then he went on to say, you can use this for anything in our lineup, Case tractors, combines, backhoes, loaders, skid loaders. And Dad said, what don't they get? I don't want a letter of credit. I want a check I can take to the bank. And I said, they're trying it. So go to a lawyer, have a lawyer draft a letter, cite the law if you have to, and I think the lawyer will know which law to cite. Tell them you want a check. That's the way it worked, and in probably about 30 days he got a check. And he called me that day too. He said, thanks for that advice to go to a lawyer. I got a check. He said, the next test is to make sure that check is good. But but it was, and the next good news came just a few months later, the empty store building. Dad thought, we'll never sell that. We'll be stuck with that for a while, and the roof will continue to leak and this and that, because we fixed that roof a lot of times. Nope, they sold the store building, and the auctioneer actually had bought the depot building, so pretty soon Dad and Les were cleaned up. Case check was good. A local seed dealer bought the store building, and then Dad got into toy collecting, and he wasn't 65 yet, but he was retired and enjoying life. He had his issues with lung cancer. He died in 96, but he had a good 10-year or so retirement, enjoying restoring toys. And I got pictures along. They're at my other table, but I got a whole bunch of pictures of Dad's toy business. Back a little bit to most of you people that knew him later in life, if you knew him at all, you knew him as John. Well, he was Johnny to me and everybody else. In fact, people around town would ask me, are you Johnny's boy or Les's boy? No, I'm Johnny's. Well, anyway, Grandpa was John, Dad was Johnny. But when Grandpa died in 75, then my dad became John. So, we're about done, but then in 2011, Dodge had a 125 celebration. So we got together and had some flags around a pickup, and they just said Mlnarik family on there. That's the sign from the store. And that's a great nephew of mine, and that's my grandson, Jason. So we drove that through the Dodge Parade. And so another good thing that happened before that, this guy from West Point, Harry Kenobi, called me and said, for the Dodge Parade, I'm fixing up this R190 truck with a flatbed, and I want to put a Super MTA on it and tribute to Dodge Implement, to your dad and Les. He thought a lot of those guys, and they thought the same of him. And I said, sure, go ahead. So he said, can I do this and put their name on it? I said, sure. That's not representative of what they had at the time, but this was for that parade. And he said, if I could get a hold of Robert and Les and make sure they could come. So I did. And Robert came that day, and he drove the truck, and Les was the passenger. Les was 92. He could barely get up in there, but he did. So, yeah, that's Brian here and grandson Jason. And the next one is my nephew John and his son JT. So this is another John Mlnarik, and that's a John Tyler Mlnarik. So same day of the parade of that big deal in Dodge on 2011, my sisters and brothers were almost all there except for one brother. But I had dug all the hats out I could find, and I told all the girls, you're wearing an IH hat today. So some of them kept them on for the picture, some didn't. My oldest sister, Susan on the left, the youngest Lisa in the middle, next Shirley, and then Diane and Judy. Yeah, there was 5 boys and 5 girls. Oh yeah, so just recently, about a month ago, I took this picture of the building. That's the way it looks today. I should have got a picture of the street to look like those first ones from the very first photo, but I didn't do that. It's on the west end of Dodge. If you're going there, you have to be going on purpose. It's out of the way. You got to get off the highway. But it's going to look kind of like it used to, except it's a lot quieter than ever. The big cheese plant is closed. The Dodge dealership is gone. The Ford dealership is gone. The restaurants are gone. The bowling alley's there, and one bar, and a co-op, and a bank. Oh yeah, and a mortuary. So Dodge is getting quieter, just like kind of most little towns. I think that's it, isn't it? So that concludes. Yeah, geez, I did this yesterday in 59 minutes, and I see I just took 57. So